Is freedom of the press in danger in our nation? We'll discuss that next on the Constitution Study.
There's one thing you have to know wherever you make your stand. Came from a long through line of everyday Americans.
Hello there, everyday Americans. Paul Engel here with the Constitution Study, where we read and study the Constitution and teach the rising generation to be free. I'm glad you could join me. As I said, we're going to be talking about freedom of the press, but if you want to find out more, please head over to the website, constitutionstudy.com. That's where you can find out all that we're doing and all that we're covering here at the Constitution Study. You can join and sign up for more. Also ask if you're on YouTube, subscribe. If you're on Facebook, follow me. And share the information. I've had several people discuss with me lately the opportunities to share this word farther and farther, and I think that helps. Education is the core of a free society. If the people don't know what their rights are, if they don't know what's going on, then it really infringes on our ability to govern ourselves. And we're going to get into that as we talk about freedom of the press today. But consider sharing it. I would appreciate it greatly. As I said, today we're talking, what is freedom of the press? This all started from a Facebook post I found out where a gentleman by the name of Joey Lankowski, a self-described citizen journalist, was denied access to a Las Vegas Police Department press briefing. And the video he posted on Facebook says, well, I'm a member of the press and you're infringing on my freedom of the press. And I'm sure there's a lot of backstory, and I really don't want to so much comment on the specifics of this situation and this story. What I do want to cover is, do we really understand what freedom of the press is? It seems to me to be a good opportunity to do that. So if we're going to figure out what freedom of the press is, well, we have to define the words. In case we have to define what is the press. I go back to my trusty Webster's 1828 dictionary, and we read that press is the art or business of printing and publishing. A free press is a great blessing to a freed republic. A licentious press is a curse to society. And boy, there's a whole episode or three right there. So basically, if you are in the art of or business of printing and publishing. Now, I've heard a lot of people say, well, the Constitution doesn't keep up with the time as it changes, and, they never knew about the internet back then. But here's a perfect example. Freedom of the press means if you print or publish. Now, okay, so if the art or business of printing and publishing is the definition of press, what does the First Amendment mean? Well, let's take a look at the amendment in question. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press. It goes on to talk about the right to peaceably assemble and to petition for redress of grievances. But notice what we have here. Government cannot create a religion, nor can they prohibit you from the exercise of that religion, nor abridge your freedom to speak or to publish. Remember, press, the art of printing and publishing. Now, how many times have you heard people say, the news media is the only profession protected by the Constitution? It's not really true. The Constitution says freedom of the news media. It says freedom of the press. You see, if we put this language into context, we understand we're dealing with freedoms of expression. You can express your religious identity. You can express yourself verbally. You can express yourself in the printed page. Now, as this has gone over time, the written word is not just a printing press. It's also letters. It's websites. It's email. It's anything that's printed. And publishing includes not just books and news articles, but radio, video, whether it's over the airwaves or over the internet. So the general idea that the federal government cannot impose on your ability to express yourself verbally or through the published word, both written and articulated. Now that gets into so first of all, we have a fundamental misunderstanding of what freedom of the press means. Freedom of the press does not mean freedom of the news media. Freedom of the press means you want to go down and get something printed, be my guest. You want to go down to a copy shop and make 100 copies of a pamphlet and hand it out, you're willing to do that. You want to have a website and you want to express your ideas there, absolutely fine. The government is not allowed to infringe on that right. Which is where we get to the interesting question of Mr. Lankowski. You see, when he showed up, he was denied access because his press pass was made by him and his group, not one of the corporate news media. You see, the question really was, there was a gentleman on the video that said, quote, "Just because you made up your own press pass does not make you a member of the press." Technically, he's true. It was not the fact that he had a press pass, regardless of who made it, that makes him a member of the press. It's the fact that he is engaged in the art and business of printing and publishing. He has a website. He publishes news articles. He may publish video articles. He is in the art and business of publishing. Therefore, he's a member of the press. But that's not the way it was seen. Now, here's the next question. Because Mr. Lankowski is a member of the press, does that mean he has automatic access to a press conference? Now, we discussed this a bit in a previous episode where we talked about Jim Acosta and the White House press pass and all that fun and games. The person giving the conference, the person or group, they determine who is allowed in, what their requirements are, and who gets to ask questions. That's the way of an assembly. See, a press conference is not freedom of the press, it's the freedom to assemble. And they get to choose who they want in there and who they don't want in there. Now, this is a public entity. This was the police department of the city of Las Vegas. So the rules for who gets to be in the press conference should be determined by the elected representatives of the people of the city of Las Vegas. I don't know if that was done. That's why I said I'd need to get into a lot deeper to go on that. But we've redefined the press so much that suddenly it's the news media. And nobody here seems to really understand what freedom of the press really means. Now understand, I believe a free and independent press, a free and independent news media is extremely important to a free nation. It's about the dissemination of information. It's the ability to express yourself, to express ideas, especially ideas that are undesirable to certain people in power. So that is, again, that is a in-depth discussion for another time. Tell me if you'd like that. If you'd like me to get into the news media and what that means and all with the Constitution, please put it in the comments below. Let me know. Be more than happy to take a look at that. But the point I'm trying to make is when we hear people talk about freedom of the press, don't think news media. Think anybody who publishes information, to do so without federal interference. And what's interesting is when I was researching this, I had a blast from the past. See, who remembers back in 2013, a little bill called Senate Bill 987. It was out of the 113th Congress. And it was a bill to maintain the free flow of information to the public by providing conditions for federally compelled disclosure of information by certain persons connected with the news media. Now, this got a lot of attention when Senator Dianne Feinstein proposed an amendment to this bill that would define real reporters. First of all, who is a real reporter? Second of all, why does it matter? And most importantly, who gets to decide? You see, what we see as a bill that they wanted to define protections and processes for compelling covered journalists to be forced to disclose information in federal court. Now, this particular bill, along with its companion H.R. 1962, it never made it past the committee process. So I won't go into their details, but there is one thing that should stand out and should really grab our attention and really concern us. That is the federal government trying to decide who they will extend First Amendment protections to. The First Amendment is part of the Constitution. The Constitution created the federal government. The Constitution tells the government, not the government tells the Constitution. The Constitution tells the federal government what it can and cannot do, not the other way around. You see, the language of the legislation was meant to codify the practice of giving special protections to members of the press. Specifically, the idea that a reporter was ethically bound not to divulge information they received without the source's permission. We've all seen it. The courtroom drama in the movies, on TV. A reporter is called to court to testify, and they're asked an uncomfortable question. They're asked to divulge their source, and the reporter refuses, and the lawyers make a big stink, and the judge threatens them with contempt, and the reporter goes to jail, all to uphold his journalistic integrity. Something along those lines. The one question no one seems to ask is, where in the Constitution does one profession get special treatment? Where does it say the laws are different if you're a member of this profession versus that profession? And if we properly define the word press in Amendment 1, we see that nowhere did our founding fathers give one profession special treatment. It doesn't exist. Now, I'm sure those in the press will say, oh, yes, it does. Yes, it does. Look at all the lawyers that say this. Well, sure, it's their special treatment that they want to protect. You see, we forget that the question of freedom of the press was hotly debated during the part of the ratification debates. And in fact, Alexander Hamilton said in Federalist 84, what is the liberty of the press? Who can give it any definition which could not leave the utmost latitude for evasion? I hold it to be impractical, and from this I infer that its security, whatever fine declarations may be inserted in any constitution respecting it, must altogether depend on public opinion and on the general spirit of the people and of the government. Here's the question. What is it? And how could you word it so it couldn't simply be evaded? You see, sadly, what happened was Congress wanted to codify a practice. They wanted to set the rules by which they could compel a journalist, scare quotes, to give testimony in federal court. They wanted to determine who they would extend certain protections to. And doesn't that scare you? I mean, it scares me. It rather bothers me that the federal government is going to determine who they will determine is, well, you're a part of the press, so we'll give you protections. See, the language, and I'm sorry for the small print, so the only way I could fit this on the screen in any logical order, but it says the term covered journalist means a person who is or on the relevant date was an employee, independent contractor, or agent of an entity or service that disseminates news or information by means of newspaper, nonfiction book, wire service, news agency, news website, mobile application, or other news or information service, whether distributed digitally or otherwise, news program, magazine, or other periodical, whether in print, electronic, or other format, or through television or radio broadcast, multi-channel video programming distributor, as such term is defined in Section 602.13 of the Communications Act of 1934, or a motion picture for public showing. Don't you love legal speak? Don't you love lawyers? In English, a covered journalist is someone who works for the corporate media. That's what they're trying to say here. They're saying if you get a paycheck from a news organization that we recognize, we will give you special protections. Isn't that lovely? They just want to limit First Amendment protections to those who are who did this for a living. They wanted to extend freedom of the press only to people that they thought were worthy of being considered the press. And before you go complaining, those darn Democrats, understand several Republicans co-sponsored this bill as well. So you see, it's not a left versus right, red versus blue, conservative versus progressive. It is Washington versus everyone else. So you may be asking yourself, why all the hubbub over a defunct bill and an internet reporter? And because when at the Constitution study, we try to take the time and look deeper, not at the shallow sound bites that are thrown at us. What's actually going on? It's the idea of where does any government get the authority to determine who they will extend constitutional protections to? Where? The short answer is, we've let them do it for so long. Why are we surprised they continue to do it? See, when we let those who represent us break the rules, ignore the laws and get away with it, we encourage them not only to do it again, but to go even farther. So in short, because Senate Bill 987 was debated with nary a whisper, nobody really complained about it except for a brief stint on the news with a Feinstein interview, a press officer in Las Vegas thinks that he gets to define what is and isn't press. When one of us is denied the protections of the Constitution, it endangers it for all of us. I don't know if Senate 987, if it had been debated in public, if the question was raised of can the federal government determine who isn't the press, would that have changed the opinion of this press officer that you have to be a member of the corporate media in order to be a member of the press? I don't know. I couldn't tell for certainly, but I'll tell you one thing. If we're going to let the federal government determine that ABC, CNN, Fox, MSNBC, if they're going to say we're only going to afford these protections to those entities, we are in trouble. And we're in worse trouble than we realize. See, if the federal government can decide who they're going to grant freedom of the press protections to, what's to stop them from deciding who they're going to allow freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of person, freedom of property? Who's going to protect those if we let them decide who they're going to protect? It seems like it's a little it seems like a small story in a local newspaper that really doesn't mean very much. But we keep forgetting that if we're not willing to protect the rights of others, we'll soon find a day when there'll be no one around to protect our rights. You may remember the poem by Martin Niemöller. See, first they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. We're in that situation here in America. See, first they came for the press, and I didn't speak out because I didn't think I was a member of the press. Maybe they came for our right to bear arms or our freedom from unreasonable search and seizure. And I didn't stand up because I didn't think I knew what was necessary. Then they came for our due process rights. And I didn't do anything because I didn't think it mattered. Then they came for something I enjoyed. And there was no one left to stand for me. This little thing, when we stop and examine what was actually going on, actually turns out, I think, not to be as little as we thought. I think it's worth spending some time going, yeah, maybe I need to better understand words like freedom of the press, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, the right to keep and bear arms, to be free from unreasonable search and seizures. We should better understand these so that when these types of situations happen, we take the time to think logically and reasonably, and maybe we come up with a better answer than, it's not me, no big deal. Because if we won't protect someone else's rights, there'll be nobody there to protect ours. So I hope this made you think. Check my links. Go to constitutionstudy.com, find the article this is based on, check it out, and tell me in the comments below, did I get it right? Who do you think is a member of the press? What press is worth protecting? Again, I hope you'll subscribe. I hope you'll follow. Put those questions in the comments, please. Let me know if there's something you'd like me to cover here. I hope to see you again next time on the Constitution Study.
There's one thing you have to know wherever you make your stand. Came from a long through line of everyday American.